The sleeping empath. There are people who walk through this world quietly, feeling more than most can name. They sense the sadness behind a smile, the exhaustion behind a "I'm fine," the tension in a room before a single word is spoken. To them, emotion isn't just an idea, it's a temperature. It's a frequency they absorb. They are called empaths. But before awakening, before awareness turns into power, there is the sleep. And in that sleep, the empath suffers. They learn, often as children, that peace depends on how well they can keep everyone else comfortable. They read faces like weather reports, predicting storms, adjusting their behavior to keep the air clear. If love means harmony, then safety means self-erasure. They shrink, they soothe, they disappear. Psychologists describe this pattern as hypervigilance, a survival mechanism born in environments where emotion was unstable. The empath becomes an emotional antenna, constantly scanning, absorbing, interpreting, because somewhere in their past, someone's feelings dictated their safety. If a parent's anger meant chaos, if silence meant danger, then reading emotions became a form of control, a way to stay safe by staying alert. Carl Jung might say that the empath's gift is born in the shadow, the unspoken agreement, I will carry what others can't bear, so that love will not leave me. But the cost is high, because to carry everyone else's feelings is to forget the sound of your own, the mirror of pain. Ilara was the kind of person who could calm any room she entered. She had a way of listening that made others feel seen, truly seen. But when she was alone, silence felt heavy. Her body ached with emotions she couldn't name. When her friend cried, she felt it in her own chest. When her partner was angry, her pulse raced as if the anger were hers. She thought this was empathy, but in truth, it was fusion. She had no boundary between self and other, and like water taking the shape of every container, she forgot her own form. Empaths often confuse energy absorption with kindness, but what looks like compassion is sometimes a hidden fear, the fear of being unloved if they stop fixing everyone else. Psychologically, this is enmeshment. It's when empathy becomes survival. Dr. Judith Orloff, a psychiatrist who studies empaths, explains, without boundaries, empathy turns into emotional exhaustion. You absorb pain that isn't yours until you forget which feelings belong to you. And that's how the sleeping empath suffers. They become the healer who never heals, the giver who never receives, the listener who is never heard. If the gaslighting victim's illusion is doubt, then the sleeping empath's illusion is responsibility. They believe they are responsible for the emotions of everyone they meet. They call it love, but it is bondage. And this is the first prison the empath must see before they can awaken. The breaking point. One night, after years of holding her partner's anger and her friend's grief, Ilara finally broke down. She sat in her car crying, not because of what happened, but because she couldn't tell why she was crying anymore. Was it hers? Someone else's? Did it matter? In that moment, she realized something terrifying. She could feel everyone, but she couldn't feel herself. That's when awakening begins, not with light, but with emptiness. The empath's awakening starts where their old identity collapses, when they realize that carrying the world's pain doesn't heal it. It only silences their own truth. Awakens said, "When you let go of trying to control the world, you begin to see that the world is you." The sleeping empath tries to control emotion by healing everything they touch. They believe peace will come once everyone else is okay. But true peace begins when they realize their empathy is not meant to absorb, it's meant to understand. Their gift was never to carry pain, but to illuminate it. And so the old self, the rescuer, the pleaser, the absorber, begins to dissolve. The empath begins to sense the faint call of awakening, that love is not sacrifice, that compassion is not martyrdom, and that boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. This realization, though small, is the first crack in the illusion. The light begins to seep in.
The mirror and the mask. Once the empath learns to absorb emotion, life begins to mirror that gift back, not with kindness, but with contrast. It's as if the universe whispers, "Here is your lesson, to see your reflection in disguise." And often, that reflection takes the shape of a narcissist. Psychology calls this the empath-narcissist dynamic, a magnetism born of opposites that complete a wound. The empath feels too much. The narcissist feels too little. The empath gives endlessly. The narcissist takes without pause. It is not love at first sight. It is recognition, a subconscious familiarity, two unhealed wounds greeting each other in the dark. Carl Jung called this the shadow dance, the meeting of our disowned selves. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The empath calls it love, destiny, chemistry. But underneath, it's the psyche trying to heal through repetition. The empath sees the narcissist's pain and mistakes it for depth. They see a wounded child inside the manipulator and call it potential. And the narcissist sees in the empath a reflection of what they crave most: adoration, validation, unconditional regard. Together, they complete a circuit of illusion. Story example 3. The Golden Mirror. Ilara met someone who seemed to understand her like no one else. He praised her kindness, admired her intuition, told her she was special, not like anyone else. She felt seen, finally. He mirrored her light so perfectly that she mistook it for connection. But soon the mirror began to crack. Her emotions became too much. Her needs became burdens. The same empathy that drew him in became the weapon he used to control her. He said she was sensitive, unstable, dramatic. He said her intuition was paranoia. And slowly, she began to question her own reflection. In the empath's world, criticism feels like truth because they've built their identity around others' emotions. So when the narcissist distorts reality, the empath's mind bends to maintain peace. This is gaslighting in disguise, but to the empath, it feels like self-doubt. And that's the cruel beauty of this dynamic. The empath tries to heal the narcissist, while the narcissist tries to own the empath's light. Each believes they can fix the other, but only one is truly trying. Carl Jung might say, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But not all transformation is gentle. Some awakenings begin in fire. Alanwatts' reflection. Watts often said that human relationships are mirrors of consciousness. He said, when you look in the mirror, you see yourself. But the mirror doesn't tell you what you should be. The empath, however, mistakes reflection for instruction. They shape-shift into what others need, forgetting that their own light was the source all along. Story example 4. The awakening conflict. One night, Ilara and her partner argued. He accused her of imagining problems, of making things up for attention. But this time, something in her didn't collapse. For the first time, she observed him, not through emotion, but through awareness. She noticed how his eyes shifted when she stood her ground, how his anger grew when she didn't apologize, and every accusation was a projection of his own fear. And in that moment, something ancient stirred within her, the faint realization that she was not the broken one, that his reflection no longer defined her worth. This is the turning point of the empath's journey. The mirror no longer controls them, but it still holds their gaze. They begin to see the truth behind attraction, that they were never drawn to the narcissist's charm, but to the familiar echo of their own unhealed wounds. In every person they met, they were replaying the first moment they silenced themselves. In every manipulator they met, they were confronting their own forgotten boundaries. And when the empath finally sees this, their suffering begins to change shape. The pain is still there, but now it speaks. It no longer says, "You are weak." It whispers, "You are awakening." Alan Watts once said, "When you realize that the road you are on is not going to get you where you want to go, you begin the journey home." The empath begins this journey not by fixing others, but by returning to their own energy, their own awareness. They begin to notice what drains them, what nourishes them, what is theirs and what is not. The illusion of saviorship begins to fall away.
The awakening. Awakening doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes as a slow, quiet undoing, a dismantling of illusions built for survival. For the empath, awakening begins the moment they stop trying to heal others and start understanding why they needed to. At first, this realization feels heavy. There is grief in awakening, the grief of lost identity. Who am I, if not the healer, the listener, the peacekeeper? But that question is exactly where freedom begins. The empath starts to sense an unfamiliar silence, not loneliness, but space, a stillness untouched by anyone else's emotion. And within that stillness, something ancient whispers. You were never meant to carry their storms. You were meant to dance in your own rain. Psychologically, this phase is called individuation, Carl Jung's term for becoming whole. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the empath, this means separating feeling from fusion. It means sensing others deeply without absorbing them. It means understanding that empathy without boundaries is compassion without truth. Story example 5. The first boundary. After months of silence and self-reflection, Ilara received a message from her ex. He said he missed her, that no one else had understood him like she did. Her old self would have rushed back, the healer, the savior, the fixer. But this time, she paused. She felt the pull, the familiar ache of responsibility, and she breathed through it. She didn't respond out of guilt or fear or longing. She responded from awareness. She simply said, "I hope you heal, but I can't be your mirror anymore." And for the first time, her compassion included herself. This is the sacred moment when the empath begins to awaken, when love expands beyond the need to fix. Alanwatts once said, "You do not look out there for God, something in the sky. You look within yourself." The empath begins to understand that every emotion they've ever absorbed was not a curse, it was a message. Each wave of sadness, each echo of anger, was life teaching them the language of energy. But until now, they had been speaking it unconsciously. Awakening means learning to translate that language consciously, to discern, this feeling is mine, this one is not. This energy is love, this one is control. As awareness deepens, the empath begins to feel lighter, not because the world changed, but because perception did. They begin to see emotions as currents, not identities. The narcissist's manipulation becomes transparent. The friend's chaos no longer hooks their nervous system. The empath starts to observe, not absorb. And this shift from reaction to observation is the very essence of awakening. Carl Jung described it this way: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The empath's darkness is not hatred or anger. It is their own suppressed truth, the part that was never allowed to say no. When they reclaim that voice, they discover that love without self-respect is not compassion, it is surrender. And real empathy includes both heart and boundary. Story example 6, the silence within. One morning, Ilara sat at her window watching the sunrise. No music, no phone, no distraction, just silence. For the first time, she didn't feel the world pressing against her chest. She didn't feel the need to fix, to explain, to save. She simply existed. And in that stillness, she realized something profound. She could feel everything and still be at peace. The world no longer dictated her inner weather. She had become the observer, not the storm. Alanwatts often reminded us that awakening is not an achievement, it's a remembering. He said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." The empath, once burdened by others' emotions, realizes they were never too sensitive, they were simply tuned in to a deeper frequency. But sensitivity without awareness was suffering. Now, with awareness, it becomes wisdom. Reflection. To awaken as an empath is not to harden, but to soften intelligently. It's not to stop feeling, it's to stop mistaking others' energy for love. It's to realize that boundaries are not walls, they are doors that only truth can walk through. And in that realization, the empath doesn't lose their gift, they refine it.
Boundaries and becoming. Awakening is not the end, it's the beginning of becoming. For the empath, awakening opens the eyes, But boundaries teach the soul to walk with them open, because sensitivity without structure is chaos, and empathy without discernment is self-erasure. Boundaries are not rejection, they are alignment. They say, I see you, I understand you, but I will not dissolve for you. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Boundaries are how consciousness takes shape in human form. They are how the empath stops calling self-sacrifice love. Story example 7. The Circle of Light. Ilara, now months into her awakening, began to notice something new. Her body reacted before her mind did. When someone entered her space with heavy energy, she felt it, not as emotion, but vibration. But instead of absorbing it, she visualized a simple image, a circle of light around her, not as defense, but as definition. She began to say no without apology, to say, I need space without guilt, to leave when peace left the room. And strangely, instead of losing people, she began attracting those who respected energy as she did. Psychologically, this is when the empath begins integrating what Jung called the shadow self. The shadow is not evil, it's everything we've denied in ourselves. Anger, assertiveness, independence. When the empath embraces those traits, they don't become cold, they become whole. They stop trying to be good and start being real. Alanwatts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." Boundaries are the stillness that clears the mud of emotional enmeshment. They allow clarity to rise naturally without the need to over-explain, over-div, or over-feel. Story example 8. The Test of Guilt. One evening, Ilara's mother called. Her voice trembled with disappointment. "You never visit me anymore," she said. "You've changed." And Ilara had. Once, guilt would have pulled her back into compliance. But now, she breathed through the guilt, feeling it, without obeying it. She realized guilt wasn't proof of wrongness, it was proof of growth. So she said softly, "I still love you, but I also love me now." And that night, for the first time, she slept peacefully without the old ache of emotional debt. Boundaries are not built overnight. They are practiced, moment by moment, in every choice that honors energy over obligation. It begins with simple acts, not answering a message that drains your spirit, ending a conversation when your heart tightens, choosing silence instead of defending your truth. Each small act says to your nervous system, you are safe now. You don't need to shrink to be loved. To set a boundary is to trust the intelligence of life, to believe that saying no doesn't close the world, it refines it. Because every time you honor your truth, the universe aligns closer to your frequency. Boundaries are not barriers, they are resonance filters. They let through what harmonizes and release what does not. Carl Jung hinted at this too when he said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." The empath, now awakened, no longer seeks to be dissolved by others. They seek transformation, mutual evolution, not absorption. Story example 9. The Mirror Reversal. Months later, Ilara met someone new, kind, patient, grounded. When they spoke, She didn't feel the urge to read his energy. She didn't need to fix or prove. She simply listened, present, open, balanced. For the first time, connection didn't feel like losing herself. It felt like returning home. That's when she realized the awakened empath doesn't attract broken souls anymore. They attract balanced mirrors. The empath who learns boundaries becomes something rare. A soul who can love deeply, yet remain whole. They are no longer the emotional sponge of the world. They are its mirror, clear, still, reflective. They no longer chase peace. They are peace. Reflection. So, if you are an empath, remember this. You were never meant to carry everyone's pain. You were meant to understand it, so you could guide others out, not drown with them. Boundaries do not make you less loving. They make your love conscious. And in that consciousness, you become what the world truly needs. Not a rescuer, but a presence.
The light beyond empathy. When the empath has awakened, something subtle shifts. They no longer identify with the pain they once carried. They no longer define themselves by the energy they absorb. Instead, they begin to live from a deeper center, a place beneath emotion, beneath thought, beneath story. The empath becomes aware not only of the world, but as the world. Alanwatts once said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." The awakened empath understands this now. They realize that their sensitivity was never a flaw. It was a portal, a way for consciousness to experience itself in exquisite depth. Where before they absorbed emotion unconsciously, now they feel consciously. They can hold the pain of another without losing their own peace, because they have learned the greatest truth. You can love without carrying. You can understand without merging. You can feel everything and still be free. Carl Jung called this the stage of integration, where all parts of the psyche, shadow and light, become one. He wrote, "The individual who looks inward awakens to the reality that he is not isolated from the whole." The empath's gift was never just sensitivity. It was unity. They feel deeply because they are connected deeply. But before awakening, this connection was chaos. Now, it's coherence. They have learned the rhythm of energy, when to open, when to rest, when to release. Their empathy has matured into attunement. Story example 10. The mirror of stillness. Alara returned to the cafe where her journey began. Once, she would have scanned the room, feeling every vibration, every flicker of emotion. But now, she simply sat. Someone nearby was angry, another was sad, and she could sense it all, like distant weather. But her inner sky remained clear. No storm entered her. She had become the mountain, not the mist. That's when she smiled, not from pride, but peace. She realized she no longer needed to protect her energy. She had become her energy. The empath who has awakened does not withdraw from the world. They return to it, but differently. They walk gently, speak slowly, listen deeply. Their presence alone becomes healing, not because they absorb, but because they emanate. Alan Watts said,
To become aware of the unity of all things is to live with compassion that is effortless. Effortless compassion, that is the mark of the awakened empath. They no longer perform kindness to prove worth. Their kindness flows because it is their nature. They no longer chase love. They are love. Story example 11. The ripple effect. Weeks later, Alara met a friend still caught in toxic patterns. Instead of rescuing, she simply listened. No advice, no fixing, just space, open, safe, unjudging. Her stillness was contagious. Her friend began to slow down too. And without words, healing began, not from doing, but from being. This is the empath's highest purpose, to embody peace so deeply that others remember their own. So what happens when an empath has truly awakened? They no longer seek to escape the world, nor to save it. They simply see, clearly, wholly, without resistance. And from that seeing arises love, not sentimental love, but the vast, intelligent love that moves galaxies and hearts alike. They no longer say, "I must protect my energy." They say, "I am energy, flowing, aware, infinite." The pain that once broke them now becomes light refracted, proof of their depth, not their damage. Carl Jung once mused, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, but awakening transforms that pain into purpose. The empath's tears become intuition. Their silence becomes strength. Their solitude becomes sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, they rediscover what Alanwatts meant when he said, "When you realize that you are that which you seek, you have already arrived." Reflection. If you are listening to this and you've spent your life feeling too much, too deeply, too often, understand this: you were never too much. You were simply uncontained light, learning the shape of love. Your empathy is not a burden to be managed. It's a frequency to be mastered. And when you master it, you don't stop feeling. You start creating. You don't just survive emotion. You conduct it, like music. You become what the world quietly longs for, a soul that can feel everything, yet remain free.
This is what it means when an empath has awakened. Not a saint, not a savior, but a soul who remembers that feeling deeply is not a curse, it's creation. And in that awareness, they no longer ask, "Who will understand me?" They whisper, "I finally understand myself."